No event in American history, which was so improbable at the time of its genesis, seemed so inevitable in retrospect as the American Revolution. There were colonial voices urging prospective patriots to regard American independence as early version of manifest destiny. Yet, the mobilization of a people and the unification of a country would take more than just a cry of defiance for self-determination. It would take the rhetoric of the past, the events of the present, and the perspective of the future to create a common sense among the colonists to take up arms and overthrow the despotic government that had ruled over them for 200 years. Ultimately, Thomas Paine's sixpence pamphlet would act as the catalyst of change and the ultimate stand in history, with the enumeration of grievances in a language that energized the movement for independence at a grassroots level and transformed submissive subjects into citizens of free and independent United States. By the spring of 1774, the contract that had once bound the colonies to their mother country had been all but voided. Cries of insurgency like taxation without representation were a call to arms for people to take a stand. It became obvious that American freedom would never be secure under British rule, that the boasted Constitution of England was deeply flawed. The problem was systemic in the very design of the British government, which, like all governments, was incapable of constraining the power of hereditary rulers. The only way to redesign the machine of government was to take a stand and empower the people. Yet, the decision for independence was not an easy one. Fear would hinder the people from standing up and fighting for independence. As the crisis mounted and became a national problem rather than a regional one, resistance to political change inhibited the movement towards separate nationhood. Yet, one man came to play a central role in the founding of America. None was as unlikely as a 37-year-old former corset-maker, failed shopkeeper, and cashier tax collector who arrived in the colonies on November 30th, 1774, aboard a typhoid-ridden ship named the London Packet. Wielding a letter of introduction from Benjamin Franklin, this British man was already disenchanted with the oppressive nature of English taxes. To Paine, the colonies offered opportunity, and upon settling in Philadelphia, he took a job as an editor of the Pennsylvania Magazine. Thomas Paine's arrival to the colonies would see the ushering of England's most oppressive act, the Intolerable Acts. These acts fueled Paine's already hostile attitude toward the British monarchy and fed into his immediate desire to stand up against Britain and dissolve all ties. Thomas Paine found it difficult when colonists expressed a particular pride in being governed under Britain's unwritten constitution, one that best calculated to secure the liberty of the subjects. Paine had experienced a much different England, one where the common people were disregarded, forgotten, and ignored. To disabuse the public of the massive prejudice and error that prevented them from seeing the necessity of Americans' independence, Thomas Paine and Benjamin Rush realized that something new was required in the debate, something that went beyond the ordinary short and cold addresses of newspaper publications. A work of such length as would obviate all objections to independence. Paine would offer a suggestion guided by a maxim that the more simple anything is, the less liable it is to be disordered, and the easier repaired when disordered. That is why, in 1776, Thomas Paine authored one of the most influential and effective mediums of political advocacy in America, Common Sense. In the mere 46 pages, Thomas Paine confronted the very fear that kept colonists from taking the necessary stand. Could Americans hold out against Britain? Simply put, yes. Thomas Paine explained the many faults of a monarchy, arguing that because a great man may be made king, it does not mean his descendants would not be fools. In order to reach out and join together a divided land, his language had to transcend social differences. Paine stated that mankind being originally equal in the order of creation, the equality could only be destroyed by some subsequent circumstance. This one very important statement offers a very simple history of America and an accurate projection of its future. Paine, by asserting the equality of all of men, recalls the religious strife that was overcome by originally settling the New World and recognizes the disunity that was keeping the colonies from coming together, one of inequality through religious conflict and class divide. Paine urged Americans to recognize and overcome the distinctions of rich and poor, if only temporarily, to break from Britain and realize self-determined republicanism. The idea of unity that it restored between social, religious, and political groups of those who read Common Sense did not merely change minds, it inflamed passions, with the common and only enemy, the British Crown. This provided the first meaning of the phrase common sense, that the war for independence was obvious and there was no alternative, as well as another meaning, a common sense, a common thought between the American people. Paine borrowed his radical ideas for taking a stand from the popular Enlightenment authors like John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu. Paine began Common Sense with an audacious attempt to tunnel under the British monarchy's foundation by declaring that the lines between society and government had been blurred and that the blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature, cries, "'Tis time to part." Paine gave the Americans a call to action.
He was saying in one sense, he was holding up a mirror to Americans. He said, "Look in this mirror." This is a metaphor I'm using, okay? Look in this mirror. What do you see? So he was offering them a picture of themselves in Common Sense and what they could turn themselves into. So he was saying to them, you call yourselves British, and that you're entitled to the rights of Britons, and your rebellion is a demand to have your rights recognized by Parliament and the King. But you're not British, you're Americans.
In Common Sense, Thomas Paine told Americans that the whole world was now waiting for them to declare their independence, set up a democratic republic, and become an example to the world. Common Sense spread through the colonies at an inconceivable rate, selling 500,000 copies in 3 months. In taverns and on the streets, people would read Paine's words, turning independence from a word spoken in whispers to a word shouted on the streets. In just a few months, liberty was welcomed into the minds of men, women, and children alike. The signing of the Declaration of Independence came on July 2, 1776, 6 months after Common Sense was presented to the public. With its official signing, almost all Paine had fought for with his words became a reality. The opposition to Paine had said his writings were vulgar, obscene, untrue, that he was a malignant spirit, inevitable to ruin America, a loyalist called Charles Inglis wrote. With the Declaration of Independence, those who had tried to stifle Thomas Paine would now be trying to quiet a nation. With the Declaration of Independence, Paine's ideologies voiced in Common Sense were now the law. Thomas Paine's influence and ideas extend far beyond his era.
But it is the case, his greatest legacy would be small d democracy. I mean, seriously speaking, if you were to think about the foremost figure in the creation of modern democracy, at least as, in terms of a writer and an intellectual, I would definitely go with Thomas Paine.
Ideas such as republican government and all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. Paine had helped to embed these principles into American society. Paine's ideas were all about progress and improving the nation, the welfare of the people, and the world. As long as America is constantly moving forward, Paine's radical shifts in American ideology will continue to affect us. Through all of his endeavors, never once did Paine raise a fist. Never once did he pick up arms. Never once did he charge into battle. Instead, he picked up his pen. Instead, he dipped his quill in ink. Instead, he struck down upon the basis of tyranny. He fought the enemy in a way beyond that of a soldier. Through a set of plain truths, he fought the principles of despotism with an undying energy and love for a country he had seen endless possibilities in. Using only a pen, Thomas Paine lit a world darkened with tyranny and cruelty and erased the shadow of oppression. With his words, Thomas Paine inspired, enlightened, and began a revolution.